Hi, welcome to this short video in which I want to just talk about the Year 2, Unit 2, Work in the Health and Social Care exam with just a little bit of an overview of what to expect from the paper. So let's take a look at the layout of the paper. So paper 2 is worth 80 marks and takes 90 minutes. So you get about a minute and a bit per mark. And paper 2 or Unit 2, I find this exam far better than the Unit 1 exam. I think mostly because there is a clear structure to follow. Unit 1 for Year 1s is a little bit varied. There's a little bit of inconsistency. There's no clear structure, and it's a bit hit and miss. This one is always the same, and I quite like it because of that. So you will have 4 sections. Each section is worth 20 marks, and the sections are always ill health, learning disabilities, physical and sensory disabilities, and age-related needs. And at the beginning of each of these sections, you'll be given a scenario or a context, a case study story about a particular character or an issue. And then what will happen is the questions for that section will all be based on the context. The questions are always going to be in this order: a 2 marker, which is always identify 2 factors, reasons, explanations, something, identify 2 of them. The 4 marker is always describe 2, so it's a bit like the 2 marker plus an extra sentence. So you've identified or described or defined 2 things, and then you would explain what that's about. The 6 marker is always explain, and it's all about explaining the issue. And what I'd say is make 2 or 3 points with an explanation on each. So I think you're almost like the 1+1 style of marking. Here's my point, this is the explanation, 1+1. And then the 8 marker, like the 6 marker, you're discussing something and you're going to make a number of points with explanations, with connections to the case study. And then you're also going to put a bit of evaluation in there, any theory, anything relevant that you have learned in the course. So this is the template of this paper. So let's take a look at some of the questions. So there are common themes in this paper, and the questions will come from the materials you've covered. Now, the content you've looked at is key roles in section A, the responsibilities, anti-discriminatory practice, empowerment, risk assessment, safeguarding, kind of what the role of care professionals are. Section B was a lot about the bodies, the unions, the institutions that run healthcare. So again, it's a lot about the NHS, the different types of care sector, different roles of care sectors, and obviously how they're regulated and monitored. And then section C was kind of the specific needs of different people. So caring for young people, caring for elderly, caring for those with disabilities. Now, with these 3 sections, obviously the materials for these sections can be used across all 4 of the bits of the paper. So section A, B, C, and D, the different needs, different health issues, all this information will be used across all questions. So it isn't that section A is just for section A of the exam, section B is just for section B of the exam. This information will be used across the whole paper. So make sure you've learnt it all, because it can be used across all questions. So let's take a look at the 2 markers. And again, you make 2 points. So just as this example question here, identify 2 professionals who are responsible for administering Angela's care, or sorry, Angela's medication. Obviously, Angela is receiving treatment for breast cancer and liver cancer. So in this context, we just need to identify 2 people who would work with Angela. And again, we don't need to put any detail, we don't need to put any description, we just simply identify. It's the fact check the information. So for this example, the people we could use, looking at the mark scheme, would be GP, doctor, consultant, nurse, district nurse, palliative care nurse, nurse practitioner, healthcare assistant. Basically, you can put anyone who would be providing care. A Macmillan nurse could be a good example. And because of it, it's just literally identifying. I think what's also quite nice about these Unit 2 papers is you can see over here the wording, accept any other appropriate answer. We've gone a bit over it. So really, there is a bit more of a freedom to put anything down. As long as your answer is relevant, it makes sense, it would apply, you can still be awarded marks for it. So that's something that's I think quite good about these papers. So just coming back to the type of 2 markers you'll be given. The questions will often include 2 professionals, as this question does. It might be 2 services, two types of healthcare, two roles, two responsibilities, two ways, two individuals, two needs. So it's often it's two specific things in the context of the situation. 4 markers kind of often build on it. So again, it will say describe 2 ways social care staff support the family. So again, in this sense, it's a describe question. So you would need to identify a point, make a point, take away, in this case, how social care staff support the family, and then you describe or explain how that support is provided, what that support is doing based on the scenario. And again, it's a kind of a little bit of a fact check, again, with some extended explanations. But you don't need to keep it brief. You don't need to go massively in detail here. So looking at the mark scheme for this answer, award 1 mark for each identification and 1 additional mark for appropriate expansion. So we can see in this list, the social care staff would care and support or provide care and support planning so the family are involved. Refer to charity support groups, counselling to support the family with emotional needs. Professionals act as advocates to put the family's views of point. So again, it's you're making the way social care staff would support and why they are doing that. What is the benefit of that? And again, the described questions often against 2 professionals would do something, 2 types of service, 2 roles, 2 responsibilities. So it's very similar to the 2 marker, but it's 2 markers plus a little extra detail. 6 markers, again, we're sticking with Angela because again, the whole section will be based on the same characters, the same context, they build up as you go. So it says explain how staff could empower Angela. Now, again, with these explain questions, the focus is to recall some information, but it's also to apply and develop the scenario. So everything you're saying needs to come back to the context, the scenario, and in this case, Angela and her context. Try and make sure you've read the scenario very clearly, and then identify the actions, the roles, the groups, whatever can be done to explain what's happening and link it to your character. So in this context, looking at the marking grid, you know, the ways that Angela could be empowered would be to involve her in care and planning, provide personal or centre care, promote her rights, make sure she understands, meet her needs, provide treatment. So with these markers, the marking grid gives you a list of kind of suggested ideas, and then the grade, they kind of use levels, 1, 2, and 3. Level 1, you might give 1 or 2 isolated points. You know, you might just say 1 or 2 things that are done. There's not really much reasoning. There's not much explanation. It's quite basic. You might just say, help Angela make care plans. You know, and you're kind of in the bottom tier. Middle tier, you're adding and developing it. You're giving a bit more reasoning, but it's still a bit vague. So the top band, you want to maybe give 2 or 3, maybe even 4 key points. Why and how would staff empower Angela? When you're doing this, describe and explain. So it's I always see it again, a bit like a 4 marker. You've made your point, you've explained the point, a little extra mark to develop it and link it back to Angela. Why is that empowering her? So it's kind of the 1 + 1 + 1, and you could do that 2, 3 times. Make a point and explain it. Do a couple of points and explain it. So you've got a little bit more freedom with how you approach the question, but ultimately you want to be trying to explain how, why, and what's the benefit of empowering the case study or whatever the question's asking. So again, that explains the key bit. What is going on? How did you get there? So just to say here, I would say put at least 2, 3, probably 3 points would be better, and then explain the 3 points. If you're ever unsure about a point, you're not sure about something you said, just put more in. The more you write, the more points you cover. That's going to help. Finally, we move on to the 8 markers. Now, again, 8 markers are the discuss question, the longest question on the paper, and often they ask you to discuss an issue, a topic, an action, a role related to the scenario. What I would say here is focus on answering that question. So often in this case, like on the screen, you've got discuss the possible advantages of hospice care for Angela and her family. So very clear question. What is it? Why is it good? What is the benefit of Angela going into hospice care? And as you do that, make your point and explain it. And I got to say, go for the advantages. You know, the how, the who, the what, the when, the where. You know, why is this going to be beneficial? Or as the question says, it might be disadvantages, it could be any number of topics. So make sure you're answering the question, make a point, explain it, relate it to the case study. Treat it a little bit like you would have done with the 6 marker, making 3, maybe 4 points, and then explaining the impact, connecting it to the case study. What I'd also suggest, I think is quite good here, is balancing arguments. So it says possible advantages. Focus on the advantage, but maybe towards the end, throw in 1 or 2 problems. You know, what is problematic? What's a disadvantage of hospice care? You know, Angela will be separated from her family, from her children. It might be a reminder that she's close to death. So again, it could be just throwing in just a balanced point of view, putting in a little bit of evaluation to show both sides of the debate. But again, you're focusing on what the question's asking, in this case, the advantages. Marking grid, just to sort of show you here. So again, it gives you a suggestion of points to make. It isn't an exhaustive list, as it says on the marking grid. It's not every possible answer, so anything is credible. And that's why, again, I like the Unit 2 paper, because as long as what you've said is relevant, it makes sense, it's plausible, it can be credited. It doesn't have to meet the mark scheme exactly. Top band answers for this one, again, you're demonstrating accurate and detailed knowledge. You've got an understanding of the benefits of her going into care, the roles and responsibilities of care providers. You've made your points relevant to the context. You've explained your point and linked it to Angela and her family. And it says a well-developed and logical discussion. So it clearly considers range of different aspects. And again, you might cover a few benefits and a number of benefits for her going into hospice, but again, throwing in the other side of the debate, I always think is quite worthwhile doing, because it then shows you are thinking of all possible issues. So there we have it. So there's your 8 marker. Now my top tips, as if I had any for this question, the main things I would say: learn your content. There isn't masses of content with this paper, but be familiar with those bodies, those organisations, those roles and responsibilities. Practice the questions. I think this is the best way to learn anything and prepare for exams, is practice as many questions. You can revise the content, read the content till the cows come home, but practice some questions. Look at the style. Again, what I do in my classes, we have enough time, we will go through every past paper possible, or make up papers, and we will do as many of these questions as possible, because the format, the structure, the template of them is so repetitive. So look at the questions, look at as many questions as you can and practice those. Have a chat with your teacher, see if they can give you some. Think about services and needs of different types of patient, as the question structure is always fixed. Learning disabilities, illness. Think about particular groups. What would their needs be? So the needs of the young, the old, people with hearing impairments, visual impairments, people with different types of learning disability, people with different types of illnesses and diseases like cancer and other conditions. What support are they going to need? Think about those individuals, because the questions are going to ask you to do that. And as I say, if you're ever unsure about a point, you're not confident in something you've written, if you've got enough time left, write another point. Add something extra into the mix. There's never a problem with putting in a bit more information in an answer. It's only going to help, rather than leaving something you're not 100% on but just moving on anyway. Just throw something else in. It's never going to be a bad thing. Okay, so there we have it. So again, very, very briefly overviewing Unit 2 of the Health and Social Care exam, a little bit of the structure of the paper. As I say, go and find some papers, take a look at them, talk to your teachers. That's the best thing to do in order to prepare for this exam. Thanks for watching, and if you are doing this exam at any point soon, good luck.